Let us sit quietly, the eyes gently closed, letting go of all the thoughts about past and future, and bringing your attention into the present moment. First of all, by feeling your body sitting here now. From top to toe, and bottom to top. Feeling the body means the different kinds of sensations. And becoming aware of these sensations in the different parts of the body. In the meditation, we don't need to go anywhere. If it is real peace and happiness that we want, you don't need to go anywhere to find it, because it's basically already within you and cannot be found exterior in the outside world. You also don't need to do anything special. Just being where you are is enough. No need to become anything. Just being, being, being. And once you feel you're really sitting here now, let us briefly develop metta for all beings, including yourself and starting from yourself by wishing from your heart, may I be free from anger and fear. May I be well, peaceful, and happy. May all beings, near and far, be well, peaceful, and happy. Sabbe satta bhavantu sukhita. You can slowly, slowly open your eyes. So then, let us ponder upon the teachings of the Buddha called the Panca Niyama. Let us first see what people think about and what the Buddha says about karma or kamma. The Buddha's teachings on karma differ from those of other religions of Asia. Many people believed, and still do believe, that everything about their present life was caused by actions in the past. In this view, everything that happens to us happened because of something we did in the past. There are still quite a lot of people who believe it. But the Buddha disagreed. He taught there are 5 types of factors at work in the cosmos that cause things to happen, called the 5 niyamas or pancha niyamas. Pancha meaning 5. Karma is only one of these factors. Present circumstances are the result of countless factors that are always in flux, and there's no single cause that makes everything to be the way it is, because there's so many causes from the past, and even in this lifetime we accumulate more causes, and therefore we cannot really say there is one cause that leads to the present effect. And it is, however, not only karma which determines what is happening now. There is another niyama, if we call karma one of the niyamas, which is one of the 5, that is called uttu niyama. Now, uttu niyama is the natural law of non-living matter. This natural law orders the change of seasons and phenomena related to climate and the weather. Climate and weather, well, here it says yes, it explains the nature of heat and fire, soil and gases, water and wind. Most natural disasters, such as floods and earthquakes, which there are quite a few these days, would be governed by uttu niyama. Well, that may be true, but there are also certain things which come under uttu niyama. It is a kind of the influence of the climate, not only the physical climate, but also the social climate and the, let's say, the economic climate even, the kind of people you associate with, the school you go to, the neighborhood in which you grow up, or even the country in which you live, what kind of government they have, you see. If you are being born, unfortunately, in North Korea, for instance, it's quite a different situation than if you are born in Sri Lanka or in India. So that is also coming under Utu Niyama, this kind of, the climate, not only the physical climate, whether it rains a lot or a lot of wind, and things like that. So in modern terms, Utu Niyama would correlate with what we think of as physics, chemistry, geology, and several sciences of inorganic phenomena. The most important point to understand about Utu Niyama is that the matter it governs is not part of the law of karma and is not overridden by karma. So karma is a separate thing, Utu is a different thing. So from a Buddhist perspective, natural disasters such as earthquakes are not caused by karma. Although people do believe, whether it's true or not, that certain things that happen in the world, for instance, a plane crash, which just happened a couple of days ago in America, that probably the people in that plane itself or their relatives may not think like that, but sometimes Buddhists and Hindus, people who believe strongly in the law of karma, think that, well, this happened because of karma. Sometimes that kind of belief, even though it may not be true, it may still be helpful to overcome the suffering that people have, because they say, well, it must be karma, can't explain it in any other way, therefore we think it is karma. So then we have another niyama, which is called the bija niyama. And bija niyama is the law of living matter, what we would think of as biology. The Pali word bija means seed, like in Sinhala also. And so bija niyama governs the nature of germs and seeds and the attributes of sprouts, leaves, flowers, fruits, and plant life generally. So that is, if you put a seed from let's say a mango into the ground and you put enough of good soil and other kind of things to help it, and then the sunshine and the water, then most likely you will get what is called a mango tree and not a banana tree, for instance, unless a miracle happens, of course, but probably it won't happen. So that means in that particular seed, the tree is already basically there. Therefore, there is a law which says, yes, now as you sow, so shall you reap. That is another way to say, if you sow a mango seed, then you get a mango tree. So some modern scholars suggest that the laws of genetics that apply to all life, plant and animal, would come under the heading of bija niyama, plant and animal. Well, yes, not rocks or things like that. The rocks, although there were people who believe that there is consciousness in rocks also, in certain religions, they still believe that what we call inorganic material, such as rocks, they also have, what you call consciousness. And some people say everything is conscious. The whole universe is consciousness. That's another view, sort of a holistic view, but it may be kind of a distorted view, but still there are people who believe that. Now then, if we can think about back to karma, and karma niyama, or karma in Sanskrit, it is the law of moral causation. So all of our volitional thoughts, words, and deeds create an energy that brings about effects, and that process is called karma. So the important point here is that karma niyama is a kind of, natural law, like gravity, that operates without having to be directed by a divine intelligence. Nowadays, maybe what is called AI kind of intelligence might start to do something interfering in this process, but so far it is just intelligence of our own minds, basically, that determine our intentions. For instance, Chetanahang bhikkave kammang vadami. So it is the chetana, or the intention with which you do something and think something and say something, which creates the karma. And the karma that you create creates also the results of the karma. And one has to sort of undergo the results, the good or the bad, of those karma. So karma is rather a natural tendency for skillful kusala actions to create beneficial effects, and unskillful or akusala actions to create harmful or painful effects. So you get akusala, kusala, and akusala karma. Then there's another niyama, which is called the Dhammaya niyama. I'm just going through briefly the 5 niyamas, and later on we can still see more detail of them. So the Dhamma niyama, or the Pali word Dhamma, or Dharma in Sanskrit, has several meanings, not just several. Dharma has about 37 meanings, apparently. It often is used to refer to the teachings of the Buddha, like Buddha Dharma, but it is also used to mean something like manifestation of reality, that is the Dharma, or the nature of existence. So one way to think of Dhamma niyama is as natural spiritual law. There is some kind of aspect which makes it sort of spiritual. It's not only just physical. So, for instance, for example, the doctrines of anatta, no self. Well, I don't know what makes that spiritual. If there's no spirit or no self, then why should anatta be spiritual? That would be a good question, I suppose. Then shunyata, emptiness, and the marks of existence. That is all part of the Dhamma niyama. Then we have another niyama called chitta niyama. So chitta, sometimes spelled as chitta with CH and double T. Then it means mind or heart or state of consciousness. The word mind and heart in, let's say, in Chinese and Eastern languages like Japanese, maybe Korean, there the word for mind and heart is actually the same. And sometimes when people point at their own mind or me, they point at this area like this is me. So it can mean mind or heart or state of consciousness. And the chitta niyama is the law of mental activity, something like psychology. It concerns consciousness, thoughts, and perceptions. We tend to think of our minds as us, or as the pilot directing us through our lives, but in Buddhism, mental activities are phenomena that arise from causes and conditions like other phenomena. So in the teachings of the 5 skandhas, for instance, that's another teaching, mind is a kind of sense organ, and thoughts are sense objects in the same way like the nose is a sense organ and smells are its objects. Okay, so that is different, like an enumeration, you could say, of the Panca Niyama, the 5 what you call niyamas or laws of the universe. If we go back to the bija niyama, like the mango seed, but it is also the seed in human beings, the seed in animals, the seed of trees, that the law of organic life, you could call it. So bija literally means seed, and in the sense of germ of life, this law, called bija niyama, is essentially the law that governs the growth of organic life, from the smallest germ to the birth and growth of higher beings. So when some small particle of matter surrounded by a medium of water, which is neither too hot nor too cold, and neither too stagnant nor too fast moving, is itself coming to a condition wherein earth, water, movement, and temperature are so highly balanced that they form a unified whole, capable to resist the surrounding elements, a new variety of matter arises. So that is what happens. This new matter, although being able to resist the surrounding matter, exists what you call entirely in a dependence of, well, let's see, distracted here. So it is basically the law that governs the growth of organic life. So the new matter, although it's being able to resist the surrounding matter, it exists yet entirely in dependence of it. Hence, it is continuously moved by the forces that surround it. So you can say matter, not matter, but let's say organic matter depends on the influence of other matter around it. It's interdependent. So slowly, as this matter adopts or imitates those movements begin to function for an increasing momentum of time and more independently, and with that certain internal mechanisms evolve. Now we're looking at the embryo, I suppose, which with time begin to function longer and longer by themselves. This becomes the first living matter. That is matter which possess a certain self-initiation. So that is what happens in the bija niyama. So initially, these internal movements will be only short-lasting, and then some further external impulse will be needed again, and the impulse bringing with it also new material needed to maintain its stability. Well, maybe like in the case of an embryo, maybe the blood of the mother. Yet, slowly, even that becomes an acquisition of new matter that acquires the capacity to use its own movement, to draw in new material as its source of energy, and that also when needed. So this is quite extensive description about the bija niyama. So one can think that gradually not only the particles attract each other, but equally so develop these tissues mutual interactions and thus relations with each other. So in that slowly ever more complex entities develop. Sounds a bit like the whole development of what you call the living beings, from simple to complex beings. That is all coming under what is called bija niyama. I don't want to go into too much detail there, but one could, if one wants, read about it more. So different kind of parts of the body start coming, the head and the lungs and the heart and all kinds of things. This is basically what happens when an embryo starts growing. Not only human, but also in other mammals, I suppose. So that is all coming under what is called the bija niyama. So now these pancha niyama, the different kinds of niyamas, as they are called, they are having an interaction also between each other. You cannot say that bija niyama is just a law in itself. It is also interacting with the other niyamas. Even with karma, that also has an influence on the physical world, and the physical world also has an influence on the karma and also on other kind of things. So we can say that these pancha niyamas, they are actually a kind of analysis which was given by the Buddha. Now the thing is not in one place. We cannot say this is the Pancha Niyama Sutta from the Digha Nikaya or something like that. There's no such thing apparently, but the Pancha Niyamas are mentioned in different kinds of places in the Tripitaka. So there it is separating these different niyamas for clarity instead of having them all mixed up together. But on the other hand, they influence each other and they are not just only working themselves. I think Sarat Sirisi Nimatyagi might take So I would say, in this case, there are a number of factors that have been mentioned, and it is possible to have a discussion, maybe, if you like, about these factors as a kind of Dhamma Sakacha. Maybe a bit different from the normal suttas, but still, since there are a number of doctors and other scientists amongst you, maybe you could have little interaction. Not that I have the answer to everything. Please don't think that I know everything. Professor Manori disappeared from the screen.
Thank you, Bhante.
Yes.
So we now open for discussion. Thank you very much for bringing in the different sciences and aligning the different niyamas with the different sciences as we know them now. And showing the interplay, the influence of each other. I think if the embryo is growing, no doubt the genetics will, or whatever that bija part of it is going to start, the biology. But then if the mother is drinking alcohol, then that will be an environmental factor that will influence that child's entire life, damn him perhaps, because they have fetal alcohol exposure can end up with very severe behavioral problems as well as retardation, mental retardation, so many things. So they all interplay, isn't it? So
yeah, and even the karma of that being before life, before this life, even though we cannot prove that very clearly sometimes, but in certain cases they found that because of certain things that they've done in their previous life, they are being born like this, or they are experiencing that. So that sometimes can be, yeah, you can say proven also, but not 100% like scientific proof.
The choice of the womb that you come into is determined by the karma.
Yes, that also. Now, if you look, for instance, now this is an interesting thing. We have these tankas hanging behind me, and in certain types of Buddhism, especially in Tibetan Buddhism, you get, the choice of the next Dalai Lama. Some people ask, have they already chosen the next Dalai Lama? That's not possible, because this Dalai Lama has to first die, then he has to be reborn somewhere, then he has to grow up to a time that he can speak, and that he still remembers things from the past. That memory from the past is very important. So if one is not interested in such topics, and if one does not cultivate that interest, then maybe it's lost. But in the case of the Tibetan Buddhists, they really cherish the finding of the rebirth of the previous Dalai Lama. Not only the Dalai Lama, there are other lamas also. I know personally one Rinpoche, they call it special precious one, who was living mostly in Delhi, but he fled at the same time as the Dalai Lama in 1959 because of the Chinese attack on Tibet. And he died recently, and his secretary and two lamas, they are now, they have formed a committee to search for the rebirth of that particular Rinpoche or Lama. Lama Dobum Tulku Rinpoche is called. So that is something which, now for instance, if you look in Sri Lanka, the most venerable Balangoda Ananda Maitreya, he was the most, I think, highest developed, both in learning and also in spiritual development. So Balangoda Ananda Maitreya Hamdo, before he passed away, he said, no, I think that I prefer to follow the Bodhisattva path, which means that if I die, when I die, I want to be reborn as soon as possible to continue what I've been doing. That was his words. But nobody tried to find him. There's one person who said he was born as a prince somewhere in the Middle East, in a Muslim royal family. Maybe to convert people. But anyway, so different aspects.
So we will open the floor now for discussion, please.
Very good, please.
Thank you very much, Bhante, for that. The scientific aspects being brought in was very unusual from what we normally hear. So much merit for that. So you can all unmute, whoever who wants to, or raise your hand. You can unmute and please contribute to the discussion. I'm sure there are plenty of questions and insights.
Madhuri?
Mahendra?
May I ask a question?
Of course. We
Thank
can't
you
see
very
you
much.
very well, Mahendra. Just
I
position.
can see him. I can see him.
All right. Okay.
Right, I tilted it a
Fine.
bit more. Yeah. Thank you very much for this wonderful discussion, Ananda, Olande. What I'm going to ask may not be of great consequence, but I nevertheless like to ask because for clarification in my own mind. I have read that the concept of the niyamas first appeared in the Buddhist literature through Buddhaghosa, and that it was not there before that. So my question to you is this an interpretation by Buddhaghosa and other scholars, or does the original Buddhist text actually refer to the niyamas as such?
Now, that is an interesting question to which I don't really have an answer. In the things that I've been reading, it sounds like, the Buddha said this, the Buddha said that, but it didn't say where did he say this. Like sometimes in the Theravada suttas, they say in such and such a sutta, he said this, but here it is just sort of general. So I cannot really say, well, this is the sutta from which it came. But I personally don't know that Buddhaghosa is the first one to come with this. Is that in the Visuddhimagga, or where did he?
Yes, Visuddhimagga, yes.
The Visuddhimagga.
That's what I read. I don't know, I may be wrong. Yeah.
Well, I've read the Visuddhimagga so long ago, I think I'll have to read it again to find.
I mean, one of the reasons I asked you that question is because a lot of interpretation is going on at the moment when people discuss Buddhist concepts, and they use terms that surely wouldn't have been there at Buddha's time, like quantum physics, waves, particles.
No.
I very much doubt whether he ever used those words, but people use those words as if the Lord Buddha actually discussed particles, waveforms, quantum energy. I believe these are interpretations by people who read and...
Yes. Yeah, most probably, if it is those technical, modern words, scientific words, then most likely the Buddha would not have. But maybe if one says, well, yeah, for instance, the word chitta or vijnana, yeah, then when one starts interpreting that as consciousness or mind, yeah, of course, we cannot ask the Buddha himself whether he, what he meant exactly, but it's very unlikely that such modern technical and scientific words were used by the Buddha himself. But
Thank you.
Certain things that cover the concept perhaps could be certain things.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a cap for every day of the week, or?
Sorry?
You have a kind of a cap hanging behind you, different colors for every day.
Yeah, those are my golf caps because I like
to. And that's right. Okay.
Yeah, just a final parting word. The reason I like the concept of the niyamas is because it takes away the concept that some Buddhists, I won't say all, probably only few, attribute everything to karma.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that's very good to get away from it and think that.
Yes. Yeah. So then, whether it comes from the Buddha directly or whether it is from an interpretation, it is at least an extension to our understanding of the Buddha's teachings.
Thank you very much.
Where do you live, by the way?
I live in Manchester, UK.
Oh, UK. Okay.
Yeah. I used to live in Navala, Kotte.
Oh, really? Close to where I am, yes.
Bhante, the name Gonsal Korala is written in your temple, isn't it, Bhante?
Yes. This Srima Konsal Korala lady, she offered this house and 80 purchase of land to our Mahanayaka Thera couple of years before he passed away in 1997, actually. But he didn't make use of it. And when I was coming back from a long trip from Holland, and we discussed, then he allowed me to stay here. So since beginning of 1998, I've stayed here. And we have Sriya Gonçalo Corrales' name on a plaque sort of thing on the wall.
Gosh.
Is that where you saw it?
Yes, that's where I saw it.
Ah, yes.
What's the name again? Which Gonçalo Corrales?
Sriya.
Sriyavati Gonçalo Corrales, but it's written Gonçalo Corrales.
Right. Yeah, there's a confusion between the K and the G sometimes. But if it's a Gonçalo Corrales, there must be some sort of connection to me. I don't know what it is, though.
Oh, yeah.
Any other? Anuja? Yes, Anuja.
Venerable Sir, thank you very much for that excellent explanation of the 5 cosmic laws, and also your explanation of how they interact with one another. I think that's something that you explained, which I think is very important. Now, I'd like to ask a question. Now, in terms of how one niyama can affect an individual. Now, let us say it is a wildfire. I can think of a wildfire. Now, we saw recently how these wildfires fires swept through California.
Yep.
And entire streets and entire areas were completely engulfed by that. So
Yep.
I suppose a wildfire would come under Utuniyama, right? Wildfire would be a Utuniyama event. However, now in the middle of that entire devastation, there was one house that was not affected. So now, would you attribute that to the karma of those people who lived in that house, or simply the fact that the forces that created the fire simply didn't touch that house, but it was just one house in the middle of all this devastation?
Yeah, that, of course, those are questions that are very difficult to answer categorically, whether it is this or that caused the house to not be affected, or maybe it was made of a different kind of material, which is fire resistant, we don't know, or that the distance between the other houses and this was a little bit, I think, standing on its own. No? It was not exactly surrounded by the flames, as far as I can remember. I've seen it was a terrible thing. And then the question is also there, is that because of their karma? And then why did the other houses get all destroyed? Were all those people suffering their previous karma, or did they have they done something wrong in their life that they have to be punished like that? We don't have belief in a kind of a punishing God agency sort of thing. But on the other hand, we do believe in that we get our own results from our own karma from the past. And yes, there's somebody else that is.
And use fire resistant material.
Oh.
Yeah. Right. I on that same note, I want to also add another thing, that now there are many events, not only this fire. Perhaps this was not a good example, but there are many things. Now, like in a family, every single person got COVID, and many of them died, but maybe one person didn't get COVID. Then in my own family, my brother was on the 74th floor of the World Trade Center when it collapsed. And he had a miraculous escape, whereas in those Twin Towers, 2,000 people died. And I mean, he was caught under when the second building came down, it really crashed on top of him and two of his colleagues, but they were saved by a beam which fell on top of them, but it didn't strike them. So they were saved in that situation. So we like to think that it was his karma that saved him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's quite possible. I had in my mind that he kept on running downstairs and, you know, all those 71 stairs that he finally came down, because that famous picture, which appeared the next day all over the world, including in Jalalabad, where you were, in the UN office, you know, like a couple of people with a cloud of dust behind them from the World Trade Center coming down, and he was running, and that was him in the center of the picture.
Yeah, so, but the thing is, that was later. That picture of him outside was much later, because the first building, that was when the second building collapsed. The thing is, when the first building collapsed, it fell on, because he was in the basement of the first building when the second building collapsed. It was the second building that collapsed first, right? So he was in the basement of the first building when the second building collapsed virtually on top of them. And then he managed to escape from there. And then it was the second building that crashed, but there again, he was pulled into a shop by a policeman, and that's how he escaped. So the thing is, he had two miraculous escapes, one from the first crash of the first building, and then the crash of the second building. So, whereas so many others died. And so, you know, I mean, I feel that the way that all these other niyamas affect individuals depends a lot on that individual's karma.
Yeah, it's a very strong niyama, basically, maybe more than other niyamas at the time. And it's very strong pro-belief of, well, it must be. How can we otherwise explain that, you know, like that kind of thing? So, fortunately.
One day, can I just come in? Doesn't Buddhism give, the Buddhist teachings give a small window for this sort of thing now in the Metta Sutta, you know, the Metta Nisansa, the 11 good effects of Metta. One is you are saved from Agniva, Visangva, from fires, from poisons, and from wild animals. So it is one of the 11. It's all three are given in that particular 11. So I'm not saying everybody with metta, but there is a small window to look at it the way, not just that, you know, you want for family reasons or knowing him, look it, because in his case, I think he was watering the flowers, the plants in his thing. He was not the first to leave, Anuja's brother. Others were running out, but he sort of didn't realize this was what was happening. And before this, when it was closed, his plants had died. So he was watering his, but I had heard when his wife rang and screamed saying she could see the plane coming to the other second one or something like that. So he was he was one of the late exits. He exited late, and yet he escaped.
Actually, he exited late because he wanted his other staff members to go before him. Wow. So he was encouraging the others to go down slowly and things like that. Of course, he watered the plants because the previous time all those things had dried because there had been an explosion in 1993. But, and then on the way down, he was helping people who were injured as well. But he managed to get to the bottom when the first building collapsed.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So it sounds quite plausible, no, that even if you say metta, that is also a good karma, no, that one has done, that is done in the previous life, but he apparently also had a lot of metta in that moment also, so that this has also helped him. Must be, that's also, difficult to understand exactly which factors are all playing together, and to say it was this, it was that, it could have been. So in that sense, there could have been many different factors, and maybe it was the good karma actually as a main, you could say, factor. So
there was a question by Professor Anuja Fernand which came up. She asked whether it could be pure chance. There was a question just now.
oh yeah, that's a scientific kind of question, isn't it? It could be. When we do clinical trials, pure chance. Now, is there a thing called pure chance? One could ask. Maybe we don't always know all the factors involved. So, like, we might think it is pure chance, but it could be that there are certain factors of these Panca Niyamas also at work, which we don't know or don't recognize. But maybe it's a good idea if you want to keep an open mind for the possibility that it is pure chance. That is, if we cannot really, that is another thing. If you cannot really understand or cannot really explain through any of these five main factors, could be that we can't. And maybe one cannot, but that doesn't mean there isn't any kind of cause.
Venerable sir, I like to think that what is called pure chance is really karma. Because pure chance is something that cannot be kind of explained. It's just something, right? Whereas karma is something that can be explained in terms of the person's behavior and, all of that. There are people who are intrinsically good. And as Manu said, even in the Mettanusati Bhavana, a person who practices metta is protected from all these poisons and weapons and what have you, which is, of course, what the Buddha said directly.
Yeah.
Couple of questions,
Yes.
Bhante.
Hello, Don?
Yeah, couple of questions, Bhante. Thank you so much for that scintillating presentation. I've always followed you, particularly on the niyamas, because your long time ago discourse to the Theosophical Society in America, isn't it?
Yes, that's
Yes.
a pretty good talk, actually.
Yes, and this one is pretty good as well.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Couple of things, Bhante. First of all, the house that, just to clarify concerning fake news, the photo of the house that stood still around the fires, that is a fake photo that was distributed.
By Trump?
It was by, yes, Trump and various other associates. It was totally fact-checked and debunked by Reuters.
Wow.
News agency. Yes, they went and fact-checked it. So leaving that aside,
Why would they do such a thing? I mean,
I think it is I think some of the people in social media are very mischievous. They want to come up with all these various different possible beliefs. I think that probably is that, to try and think, get people to speculate why that is, that house was stood still, and maybe say that maybe that's because of divine intervention or some such thing like that.
oh yeah,
It was a subject of much discussion in the States when this happened. Anyway, I don't want to dwell into that fake stuff that has been distributed, but I just like to point out that there are, first of all, there isn't a sutta where the Buddha completely said, covered the entire 5 niyamas, the pancha niyamas, but the Buddha specifically and in his genius-like way covered these pancha niyamas in different suttas.
yeah.
Yes, and they are found in the different suttas. Buddhaghosa crystallized them and brought them together from the different suttas.
Oh really?
Yes. So, for instance, after having listened to your Washington speech, this element I got a bug in my head, and I started researching, because these are the kinds of questions you ask. So, for instance, in the Linked Discourses 1220, there is a special sutta called Conditions. And that's called Pachaya Sutta. The Buddha very clearly nails it on the head when he says, Uppadava tata gatanang, Anuppadava tata gatanang, Tittava sa dhatu dhamma tittata dhamma niyamata idda pachayata, which means whether realized ones arise or not, this law of nature persists. This regularity of natural laws, or I prefer to translate niyama as principles, this invariance of natural principles, specifically conditionality. This is a really interesting statement by the Buddha. And he then goes on to, in different places, point out that this, because of these laws. Now, interestingly enough, I was debating a long time ago in my mind, when the Buddha said all phenomena are subject to change, how is it that there can be then perhaps an invariance of Dhamma Niyamata in the universe? So that was something which I thought about for a very long period of time.
How can there then be some apps, you said? Or?
No. If, as the Buddha said, all phenomena are subject to change, how can there be that there are laws that may be constant?
Oh, like that.
So there, of course, then I went back to what he said, where he said, Vaya Dhamma Sankara Apamadena Sampadetat, which means all conditioned phenomena, which is the term that I missed. So all conditions phenomena are subject to change. And as you related in your earlier on, when you were saying this, you referred to gravity. Now, for instance, gravity exists, but the way in which it impacts people are different. The way which impacts both humans and the flora and fauna are different. So then I went into the fact that maybe when you are talking about niyamas, and if you go into the root and you dissect the term ni-ya-yama, niya, Pali, relates to some certainty, regularity, or order. Niya. Yama is derived from the root yam, which is to restrain, govern, or control. This is an absolutely brilliant exposition of the Buddha, and you find his references in the different suttas. I don't have time to go into all of them, but this is just one example. So thank you so much for that presentation.
Yeah, just by the way, you mentioned about my talk in America. It was not in Washington, D.C. It was, in the place called Olcott,
okay,
the headquarters of the Theosophical Society near Chicago.
Okay.
And that talk actually is in YouTube. If you go to Olande,
I know it is in YouTube. I downloaded it, and unfortunately, that was a long time ago in my slightly younger days after you gave that talk. I downloaded it and I was going to transcribe your statements.
But I would like to just mention to people that it's available in YouTube. And
yeah, it is.
For Olande Ananda, and then for, let's say, Panca Niyama, Theosophical Society, because Panca Niyama talk I've given here and there, Indonesia, other places, but that particular one, it came out quite well, I think.
Yeah.
So,
you were slightly older then, but you were in full flow in the presentation.
I was older than I am now. Okay.
I did download the audio, and I was thinking of transcribing it to put it into text.
Oh, really?
I have a feeling I transcribed it a long time ago, but I can't find the file in my server.
But if I may advise, I think the audio part is better, actually.
Yeah, audio part. No, the visual one is good as well.
Oh, the visual.
Yeah.
Yes. But anyway, what I thought is that if people are getting this particular talk anyway on the Servants of the Buddha YouTube, but if they are interested in a little bit more extensive, maybe better talk, then they could go to that other one.
Now, in this specific statement, the Buddha talks about the regularity of natural principles. I personally prefer, instead of translating it into English as laws, I tend to prefer personally to refer to them as principles, natural principles governing the cosmos.
Yep.
I think Sir Roger Penrose, who won the physics prize, I think in 2022, is veering towards these kinds of thinking.
Principles.
Yeah, I'd rather prefer to relate to gravity as a principle rather than the law. The translation as a law tends to be a bit too heavy for me.
Yes.
As being totally rigid and static. But of course, laws are subject to change. There is no doubt about that. We can change laws if they are not if they are not useful. But I prefer to call them natural principles. That's my feeling about it.
That's your democratic right.
Yeah, there is, I mean, for instance, this term Tittava Dhatu is absolutely brilliant from the side of the Buddha. And that's something which really needs to go into at some point in the future.
Yes. Maybe we should give some other people a chance if there are people who want to put a question, because the time is also up, more or less. But thanks very much for your valuable contribution.